My name is Renata Cole. I'm 32 years old. At my husband's company board meeting held 3 days after we buried him, my brother-in-law looked me in the eye and said, "You were never part of this family. You were just something he kept around." Then he slid a piece of paper across the table and told me to sign it. I looked down at my 7-year-old daughter sitting beside me, her small hand clutching my sleeve, and I thought, they have no idea. I picked up the pen, set it back down, and made one phone call. By the end of that afternoon, my brother-in-law was the one doing the signing. But let me start from the beginning. My husband passed on a Tuesday. Cardiac arrest. No warning, no build-up, no goodbye. He was 41 years old, healthy by every measurement we knew, and then one morning he was just gone. I found him in the kitchen. I won't describe that part. Some things you carry without words. His name was Derek. He built his company from a single rented desk in a shared workspace to a mid-sized logistics firm with 43 employees. He did it quietly, without fanfare, without anyone handing him anything. That was the thing about Derek, he never needed applause. He just worked, and he loved us, and he was careful about everything he touched. Including, as it turned out, what he left behind. But I didn't know the full shape of that yet. Not then. Then I was just a woman standing in her kitchen, waiting for the paramedics, holding her daughter who kept asking why Daddy wasn't moving. The days between his death and the funeral are a blur to me now. People brought food. Our neighbor stayed 2 nights. I don't remember sleeping. My daughter, her name is Cressida, we called her Cressy. She stopped talking for about 48 hours. She would just sit near me and hold my hand, this small, warm weight, and I would remind myself that I had to keep breathing because she needed me to. The funeral was on a Friday. His family flew in from out of state. His mother, his older brother, whose name was Trent, Trent's wife, 2 cousins I had met maybe 4 times in 7 years of marriage. They arrived the evening before and gathered at Derek's mother's hotel, and I was not invited to that gathering. I found out about it from one of the cousins who texted me by mistake. I told myself it didn't matter. People grieved differently. They needed their own space. But there was a moment at the graveside that I keep returning to. When they lowered the casket, Cress started crying. This quiet, gulping kind of crying. The kind that hurts to hear because a child that age isn't supposed to know how to cry like that. She reached for me, and I picked her up, and she buried her face against my neck. And I looked over her shoulder at Trent. He was watching us, not with grief, not with sympathy, with something else, something that looked almost like calculation, like he was already deciding something. I told myself I was imagining it. I was not imagining it. After the burial, we all returned to the house. Derek's house. Our house. The house we had bought together 6 years ago and painted together and filled with our daughter's drawings, taped to the refrigerator, and Derek's terrible taste in throw pillows. Family came in, relatives and a few colleagues, and the rooms filled with low voices and the smell of coffee and casseroles. Cress stayed close to me. She had barely left my side since he died, and I wasn't pulling away from her. We moved through the rooms together, and I accepted hugs from people whose names I barely remembered, and I kept thinking, just get through today. Just today. Trent cornered me in the hallway near the kitchen. He wasn't aggressive about it. That was the thing. His voice was very calm, very measured, the way someone speaks when they've rehearsed. He said he wanted to talk about the company. He said Derek had mentioned, before he passed, that there were things to sort out. He said he and his mother thought it would be best if the family took over management, at least in the short term, given that I had no background in logistics. I said I appreciated the concern and that we could talk about it later. He said, "I think we should talk about it now." I looked at him for a moment. My husband has been in the ground for 4 hours. "I know," he said, "and I'm sorry, but there are employees depending on this company, contracts, payroll. You don't have the experience to handle any of that, and the longer we wait, the worse it gets." I said I understood. I said I'd be in touch. He nodded, but his eyes said something different. The next 3 days were quiet. Too quiet, the way things go quiet right before they shift. I was going through Derek's desk, looking for insurance documents, trying to get my bearings, and I found a folder I hadn't seen before. It was labeled with a date from about 2 months before he died. Inside was a letter in Derek's handwriting addressed to me. I sat down on the floor and read it. I won't share every word. Some of it is just mine to keep. But he told me things in that letter that I hadn't known. He told me he'd noticed discrepancies in the company finances over the past year. Money moving in ways that didn't match the records. He'd hired a private accountant, separately from the firm's regular accounting, to track it quietly. He didn't want to confront anyone before he was certain. He was getting certain. He had also, in the weeks before he died, met with his attorney and updated his estate documents. Everything, the company, the property, the accounts, had been restructured, not in my name. In Cress's name, held in a trust, with me as trustee and sole legal guardian of all decisions until she turned 25. He had done this without telling me, he wrote, because he didn't want to frighten me. Because he hoped he would have more time to explain. Because he loved us both. And he was afraid of what certain people might do if they knew he knew. I sat on that floor for a long time. Then I called his attorney. The meeting was set for the following Monday. I didn't tell Trent. I didn't tell Derek's mother. I just called the attorney, confirmed the documents, and asked what the process looked like. On Sunday evening, Trent called me. He said the family had talked. He said they believed, out of respect for Derek's legacy, that the company should be managed by someone with blood ties to the founding vision. He said he would be coming by the next morning with some paperwork. Transfer of management authority. A temporary arrangement, he said, while things were sorted. I said okay. I said I'd see him in the morning. I also called the attorney again and moved the meeting to 9 a.m. Monday arrived gray and cold. Trent came at 10. He brought his wife and Derek's mother, and they sat down in the living room with a kind of settled certainty, like they had already decided how this would go. Cress was at school. I had made sure of that. Whatever happened today, she didn't need to see it. Trent opened a folder of his own. Inside was a document, a management transfer agreement, signed by him, with a line waiting for my signature. Derek's mother said, "Sweetheart, this is just temporary. We just want to make sure the company is protected." I nodded. Trent's wife said nothing. She just looked around the room with the expression of someone taking inventory. Trent said, "I know this is hard. But you have to be practical. You have a daughter to raise. You don't need the stress of running a company on top of everything else." He paused. Derek would have wanted this. That was the moment something shifted in me. Not anger exactly, something quieter, something final. "Derek left a letter," I said. Trent looked up. "What kind of letter?" "A letter. To me." I kept my voice level. "And before we talk about what Derek would have wanted, there are two people I'd like you to meet." I stood and walked to the front door and opened it. Derek's attorney, whose name was Mr. Finch, stepped inside. He was a small, precise man with a briefcase he held in both hands. Behind him was the private accountant Derek had hired, a woman named Miss Adiola, who had been working quietly for the past 2 months and had, as of Friday, completed her report. Trent stood up. "Who are these people?" Mr. Finch said, "I'm the attorney for the estate of Derek Cole. I believe we have some documents to review." The room went very still. Derek's mother said, "We have our own attorney." Mr. Finch nodded pleasantly. "You're welcome to call them. I'd actually recommend it." He set his briefcase on the coffee table and opened it. He laid out a series of documents, organized and tabbed. He explained in the same pleasant, measured tone that Derek had revised his estate structure approximately 8 weeks before his death, that the company, the property, and all associated financial accounts had been transferred into a trust in the name of Cressida Cole, that I, as trustee, held full legal authority over every decision related to that trust. "That's not possible," Trent said. "Derek would have told us." "He was not required to," Mr. Finch said simply. Derek's mother's face had gone pale. "There must be an error." "There is no error." Trent turned to me. His voice had changed. The rehearsed calm was gone. "You knew about this?" "Yes," I said. "Not until after he died. But yes. This is a manipulation. You manipulated him." I looked at him for a long moment. Derek spent the last year of his life tracking money that was leaving his company without his authorization. Miss Adiola has the documentation. Dates, amounts, routing information. Trent's wife stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. Trent's face did something complicated. That's, you don't have proof of. She does, actually, Miss Adiola said quietly. It was the first time she had spoken. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Derek's mother began to cry. But I had watched her at the graveside, and I watched her now, and there was something in her tears that felt more like fear than grief. I picked up the management transfer document Trent had brought, the one with the line waiting for my signature, and I set it face down on the coffee table. Derek built that company? I said. He built it for Cress, and whatever was taken from it, we will be accounting for every dollar. Trent said, You can't prove anything. The police will determine that, I said. I filed a report this morning. The silence that followed was different from the silences before. Not shocked, not calculating, just empty. The kind that comes when someone runs out of moves. Trent's wife picked up her bag. Derek's mother said very quietly, We're family. I thought of Cress at the graveside, crying against my neck. I thought of Derek sitting at the same table, going over numbers, worrying in secret, protecting us in the only way he could figure out how. You stopped being family, I said, when you started stealing from him. They left. It wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting, no door slamming. They just gathered their things and walked out, and I stood in the hallway of our house. Cress's house now, held in her name, and listened to the front door close behind them. Mr. Finch gave me a moment and then walked me through the next steps. The police report was already filed. The documentation Ms. Adiola had compiled was thorough. Trent had, over the course of 11 months, transferred just over $140,000 out of subsidiary accounts using authorization codes he shouldn't have had access to. Derek's mother had known. The cousins, the ones who texted me by mistake, had not. There would be a process. There would be lawyers and investigators and paperwork and months of it. I knew that. But that Monday morning, standing in the kitchen where I had lost Derek, I picked up my phone and called the school. Hi, I said when they put me through to her classroom. Can I speak with my daughter? She came on the line after a minute. Mom? Hey, Bug, I said. My voice cracked a little and I let it. I just wanted to hear you. Is everything okay? I leaned against the counter and looked out the window at the yard where Derek had taught her to ride a bike 2 summers ago. The patch of grass still a little worn in a circle where she had pedaled, and he had run alongside her, laughing. Yeah, I said. Everything is going to be okay. And I meant it, not in the way you say things to comfort someone, not in the hollow way people had said things to me all week. I meant it the way you mean something when you've just understood something real and solid and unshakable. Derek had known. He had seen it coming and he had stayed quiet and careful and methodical, and he had made sure that no matter what happened, no one could take from us what was ours. They thought he left behind a grieving wife and a little girl who didn't understand. They didn't know he left behind everything we would ever need. I keep thinking about the folder, the one Derek left in his desk, labeled with a date, sitting quietly in a drawer while the world fell apart around it. He didn't leave me a speech. He didn't leave me instructions on how to grieve or how to fight or how to hold it together when someone looks you in the eye and tells you that you were never really family. He just left a folder. And inside it, the truth. That's the part I come back to most. Not the meeting. Not the moment Trent's face changed when Mr. Finch opened his briefcase. Not even the silence after I said the word police. What I come back to is Derek, alone at that desk, going through numbers that didn't add up, carrying something heavy without letting me see the weight of it, protecting us the only way he knew how, not with confrontation, not with anger, but with patience and precision, and the quiet, stubborn decision to do the right thing even when no one was watching. That's what integrity looks like in real life, not grand gestures, a folder in a drawer, a meeting with an attorney on a Tuesday afternoon, a letter he hoped he'd never have to send. I used to think intelligence meant being the loudest person in the room, The one who caught everything, who saw every angle in real time. Derek was never that. He was slow and deliberate, and he double-checked everything. And because of that, nothing they tried could touch us. The transfers were documented, the dates were there. Miss Adiola had the routing information going back 11 months. Derek had been careful not because he was afraid, but because he understood that the truth only protects you if you build it carefully enough to hold. And then there's the part about not breaking. Because I did not feel strong that Monday morning. I felt hollowed out. I had been running on 4 hours of sleep, and the kind of grief that sits in your chest like a stone you can't put down. When Trent slid that paper across the table, part of me wanted to just sign it, to make the room quiet, to stop fighting. Cress was at school. I was alone in a house full of people who had decided I didn't belong there. Everything in me wanted to fold. I didn't, not because I'm exceptional, because Cress needed me not to. Because Derek had spent the last months of his life making sure I had something solid to stand on, and the least I could do was stand on it. I think about what gets passed down to children, not money, not property, but the things they watch you do when it costs you something. Cress doesn't know most of what happened that morning. She's 7, but someday she'll be older, and someday something will ask her to fold when she shouldn't. And I hope what she remembers is that her mother set down the pen. That's what I want her to carry. Not the house, not the trust, not any of it. Just that. You can know the truth, build the truth, and hold the truth, and that combination is something no one can slide a piece of paper across a table and take from you. Derek knew that. He just made sure we'd know it too.